The challenge. The cantina smelled of engine grease and spilled liquor, a mix that only frontier stations seemed to perfect. Conversations rose and fell like static across the packed room, punctuated by the occasional bark of laughter or the clatter of mugs against steel tables. Neon lights flickered overhead, advertising watered-down drinks and docking fees in 3 different languages. Captain Jaxon Reeve sat at the bar, posture relaxed, nursing a glass of something that claimed to be whiskey. His uniform was plain, an Earth Defense jacket patched and worn, the kind you kept long after retirement. Most of the aliens here gave him a wide berth. Humans were still relatively new on the galactic stage, and few trusted a species that spread so aggressively into frontier space. A heavy shadow fell across him. "You called it a weapon?" The voice was deep, guttural, carrying easily over the din. Jaxon looked up slowly. The speaker was a Kryn, a towering reptilian humanoid with emerald skin and ridged armor that looked more like natural carapace than clothing. His name, Jaxon remembered from docking records, was Vorik, an officer of some Dominion warclan passing through. Kryn were known for 2 things: brutal arrogance and energy weapons that made most militaries nervous. Vorik jabbed a clawed finger at the pistol holstered on Jackson's hip. Primitive iron slug throwers. Garbage fit for museum shelves. You must feel shame carrying such toys. The bar went quiet. Conversations faltered as eyes turned toward the human and the Kryn. A challenge was forming, and no one wanted to miss it. Jaxon sighed, set his drink down, and turned fully on his stool. He didn't rise to the Kryn's height. He didn't need to. Calm radiated from him like armor. "It's not about what it looks like," Jaxon said evenly. "It's about what it does when you pull the trigger." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A pair of Ardrothi traders slapped their scaled tails against the floor in amusement. Someone muttered, "Humans still use metal bullets." Pathetic. Vorik's crimson eyes narrowed with satisfaction. He was enjoying this. "Then show us. Let us see your garbage weapon perform." "I don't do parlor tricks," Jaxon replied, lifting his glass again. The Kryn slapped the counter so hard the mugs rattled. "Afraid? Or do you know what everyone here already knows? The human tech is centuries behind civilized standards." The jeers stung, not him, but the reputation of his people. Jaxon glanced around. Dozens of aliens crowded closer, curiosity playing on their faces. He could walk away, let the insults slide, but that wasn't the human way. Humans didn't survive on the galactic frontier by staying quiet. Jaxon drained the last of his drink and set the glass down with a soft clink. "All right," he said, rising at last. "But if we're going to do this, we'll do it properly. No shouting matches in a bar. We'll take it to the range." That caught the crowd's attention. A chorus of approval followed, and within minutes, the cantina emptied in a tide of bodies flowing toward the station's firing gallery. The firing range was cavernous, its walls scarred from centuries of testing weapons far more exotic than anything Earth had yet produced. Rows of targets stood waiting, some armored with composite plating, others shielded by humming energy barriers. Vorik strode proudly to the line, carrying a Kryn plasma rifle. The weapon hummed with contained fury, coils glowing faintly. He leveled it at a shielded target downrange and fired. A blast of blue-white plasma streaked across the range, slamming into the barrier. The shield flared, wavered, then steadied, leaving only a faint scorch mark. The crowd cheered. "See," Vorik boomed, "a rifle worthy of war." Then, with theatrical disdain, he gestured at Jackson's sidearm. "And now, let us watch your toy fail." Jaxon unholstered his pistol. It was compact, scratched from years of service, its matte finish dulled from use. To alien eyes, it was crude. To Jaxon, it was reliable. He ejected the magazine, checked the round, then slammed it back in place with a satisfying click. "You want to pull the trigger?" Jaxon asked, offering the weapon to Vorik. The Kryn grinned, baring sharp teeth. "Gladly. I will show everyone how weak it truly is." He took the pistol awkwardly, clearly unaccustomed to the weight distribution. The crowd leaned in, anticipation buzzing through them. A human, outmatched by superior technology, was about to be humbled. Vorik aimed at the same shielded target. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Unlike the humoplasma fire, this was violent, sharp, and primal. The sound echoed off steel walls, startling more than one onlooker. The recoil kicked Vorik's hand upward, and he snarled in surprise. Downrange, the target was no longer pristine. The bullet had punched straight through the shimmering shield, through composite plating, and left a jagged hole in the armored core. Silence fell. The smell of burnt propellant hung in the air, alien and unfamiliar. The crowd stared at the smoking hole in the target, then at the pistol, then at Vorik, who stood frozen, clutching the weapon with a look that was half shock, half disbelief. Jaxon's voice broke the silence. Calm, steady, unshaken. Garbage, huh? No one laughed this time. The shot heard across the station. For several long seconds, no one moved. The smell of gunpowder still lingered, harsh and alien to nostrils accustomed only to ionized plasma and sterile discharge coils. Vorik's clawed fingers twitched around the pistol grip, as though trying to reconcile the weapon's brutish recoil with what his eyes had just witnessed. The hole in the target smoked faintly, edges jagged and blackened. Where plasma had left only a scorch, the bullet had torn through. The shield shimmered weakly before collapsing with a pitiful spark. Impossible, Vorik muttered. His voice lacked the booming arrogance it carried minutes earlier. He turned the pistol over in his claws, as if expecting to find some hidden energy core inside. No solid slug should penetrate a Class 3 defense grid. A ripple of hushed voices swept through the crowd. Some muttered disbelief. Others, suspicion. A few awe. Jaxon Reeve stood with arms crossed, watching it all with a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. That's the thing about humans, Jaxon said at last, his voice carrying easily in the silence. We don't build weapons to look impressive. We build them to work. A pair of insectoid traders clicked mandibles in agitation. But energy shields are calibrated against massless strikes, one hissed. Nothing kinetic should. Exactly, Jaxon interrupted. You designed them for plasma. For lasers. For beams of coherent light. All clean, elegant solutions. You never accounted for raw mass traveling faster than sound. The murmur of voices grew louder. For the first time, doubt flickered across the assembled aliens' faces. Vorik sneered, try to regain control of the moment. Crude. Savage. You fire tiny bits of metal with explosions. There is no refinement, no sophistication. And yet, Jaxon cut in smoothly. It punched a hole in your shield where your plasma rifle couldn't. You call that crude. I call it effective. The room erupted. Some aliens jeered at Vorik's loss of face. Others demanded another test. A few eyed Jaxon with a newfound wariness, as though reassessing the small, quiet species that had dared step onto the galactic stage. Vorik shoved the pistol back into Jaxon's hand with visible disgust. A fluke, he snarled. One shot proves nothing. Jaxon slid the weapon back into his holster. Then take another. But before the Kryn could retort, alarms shrieked across the station. Red lights bathed the firing gallery in warning flashes. A metallic voice echoed from the overhead comm system. Alert! Alert! Hostile ships detected. Vaith Raider signatures confirmed. All personnel to combat stations. The crowd stiffened instantly. Fear rippled through them like static. The Vaith Raiders were a scourge along the frontier, pirates armed with advanced technology stolen from half a dozen civilizations. Where they struck, they left only ruin. Vorik's sneer turned to something grim. So, the humans' toys will have their trial by fire after all. The docking bay shook as Raider boarding craft slammed into the station's hull. Metal groaned, and the hiss of cutting torches soon followed. The gathered aliens scrambled, weapons unshouldered, voices raised in frantic orders. Jaxon moved differently. Where others panicked, he was calm, his movements deliberate. He checked his pistol, loaded a fresh magazine, and tightened the strap on his battered jacket. Where are your real weapons? Vorik demanded, stalking after him as chaos erupted. Crates, Jaxon replied, already heading toward the supply lockers near the firing range. Standard issue ballistic rifles. Shotguns. A few toys I've been keeping in reserve. Vorik barked a laugh, though unease lingered beneath it. You intend to fight Vaith Raiders with those? Their armor will. Deflect plasma. Yes, Jaxon interrupted again, prying open a crate. Inside gleamed polished metal rifles, their matte finish unassuming compared to alien plasma tech. He tossed one to Vorik. The Kryn caught it awkwardly, glaring at the weighty design. They won't know what hit them. Jaxon chambered around with a loud, mechanical clack. The sound was as alien to Vorik as the smell of cordite, but somehow it carried a weight of finality. The first breach tore through the docking bay doors. Smoke and sparks billowed as the armored forms of Vaith Raiders stormed through. Their armor shimmered with adaptive shielding, sleek and impenetrable under energy fire. Station defenders opened up with plasma rifles, the bolts of blue-white energy splashing harmlessly across the shields. The Raiders advanced without slowing, weapons raised. Panic spread. Shots went wild. Alien defenders broke formation. And then came a new sound. Thunder. Jaxon fired the first shot. His rifle roared, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. The bullet tore through a Raider's chest plate, the shield flickering uselessly as the body collapsed in a heap of broken armor and blood. The station froze for half a heartbeat. Then the other humans opened fire. Ballistic rounds cracked like storms, shredding through Raider shields as if they weren't there at all. The pirates, so confident in their stolen technology, staggered and fell, their sleek armor useless against the raw violence of mass-driven lead. Vorik stared, his plasma rifle forgotten in his claws, the human weapon heavy in his grasp. Around him, aliens gaped as they watched humans, small, underarmed humans, carve through enemies that had terrified the galaxy for years. Primitive, Jaxon muttered between shots, cycling his rifle. But effective. Vorik raised the borrowed rifle at last, clumsy but determined, and fired. The recoil nearly toppled him, but the bullet struck true. A Raider dropped. The Kryn blinked, his expression stunned. For the first time in his long warrior's life, Vorik felt the raw, terrifying beauty of recoil, the savage roar of a weapon designed not for elegance, but for victory. And in that moment, his arrogance faltered. This was no fluke. This was humanity, trial by battle. The docking bay was a storm of fire and steel. Raiders poured in from breach points, their jagged armor glowing with shifting energy fields. Plasma bolts lit the air, sizzling against bulkheads and cutting through unlucky defenders. The station crew fell back in disarray, their weapons useless against the Raiders' shields. Except for the humans. Jaxon Reeve moved like a man born to chaos. His rifle thundered, muzzle flashing with each shot, every round placed with cold precision. Beside him, two other humans fired in controlled bursts, dropping Raiders one after another. Where plasma splashed and dissipated, lead and tungsten chewed through armor and bone. Keep it tight. Jaxon barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony. Short bursts, center mass. Don't waste your rounds. Aliens scrambled to follow his lead, some clutching human rifles with nervous, awkward grips. Vorik was among them, the weight of the weapon foreign in his claws. He had mocked these crude devices only hours ago. Now he saw them tearing through enemies that his kind's finest plasma rifles couldn't scratch. A Raider charged him, shield flaring as it absorbed plasma fire from a nearby station guard. Vorik, teeth bared, raised the human rifle and squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, jarring his aim, but the round punched through the Raider's chest plate. The pirate dropped instantly, shield sputtering uselessly. Vorik stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring at the fallen enemy. He felt the heat of the barrel, the sting of recoil, the raw power of the shot. Something primal stirred in him, respect mixed with fear. These weapons, he muttered under his breath. They kill as if nothing else matters. That's the point, Jaxon said, sliding into cover beside him. He slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. Not pretty, not elegant, just effective. The battle raged on. The humans fought like predators, disciplined and efficient, making every bullet count. Their weapons roared in sharp, violent rhythms, echoing like thunder across the steel cavern. And with each crack of gunfire, the tide began to turn. The raiders faltered. For the first time, their shields failed them. Bodies piled along the docking bay floor, armor shattered by primitive projectiles. Panic rippled through their ranks. But the Vaith were not beaten so easily. With a shriek of metal, one of the raider boarding craft split open, and something far larger emerged. A war machine, towering, bipedal, bristling with cannons and shield emitters. A mech, its plating thick, its shields humming with layered defenses. Its eyes glowed a baleful red as it lumbered into the bay, each step shaking the deck. The station defenders froze. Even Jaxon's jaw tightened. Plasma fire lanced out from the mech's cannons, incinerating cover and scattering aliens like frightened prey. Jaxon fired a burst at its advancing bulk. The round struck the shield and bounced, leaving not even a flicker. "Damn," he muttered. Vorik snarled, rallying what courage he had left. "So much for your garbage weapons." "Not garbage," Jaxon snapped, eyes scanning the mech for weaknesses. "Just need the right angle." The mech raised an arm and unleashed a barrage. Explosions ripped through the bay. The station trembled, lights flickering as fire spread across the walls. Screams echoed. The defenders fell back further, morale crumbling. Jaxon crouched behind a ruined console, his mind racing. The mech's shield was stronger than standard Raider tech, tuned to resist both plasma and kinetics. His rifle rounds couldn't touch it. But every system had a flaw. Every armor had a joint. He glanced at Vorik, who was snarling as he emptied a magazine uselessly into the mech's shields. "Stop wasting rounds," Jaxon growled. "You want to help me? Then listen." Vorik whipped his head around, scales glistening with sweat. "You have a plan, human?" "Always." Jaxon pointed to the mech's leg joints. "Armor's thick everywhere, but there. Need to get close, bait it into exposing itself." Vorik blinked, incredulous. "That is suicide." Jaxon smirked grimly. "Only if you're slow." The next few minutes were chaos distilled. Jaxon sprinted from cover, rifle barking as he drew the mech's attention. Plasma fire tracked him, explosions blooming in his wake. He dove, rolled, fired again, always moving, always taunting the lumbering machine. Vorik, against all instinct, followed. His bulkier frame made him slower, but his roars drew fire away from Jaxon. Together, Predator and Skeptic, they weaved through the carnage, dragging the mech toward the center of the bay. "Now!" Jaxon shouted, signaling the others. The remaining humans opened fire, concentrating on the mech's head. The bullets didn't penetrate, but they forced it to shield its upper armor. For a split second, its leg joint flared, exposed. Jaxon dropped to one knee, sighted carefully, and fired. The bullet struck true, lodging deep into the joint. Sparks burst, and the mech staggered, balance wavering. But it wasn't enough. The machine roared, stabilizers flaring, shields redoubling. Its cannons whined, charging for a devastating strike. The defenders braced for annihilation. Vorik looked at Jaxon, saw the grim set of his jaw, and made a choice. With a wordless roar, he hefted the human rifle, sprinted forward, and leapt onto the mech's leg. Clinging to the joint, he pressed the barrel directly against exposed metal and fired until the weapon clicked empty. The joint buckled. The mech faltered, one leg collapsing. Jaxon didn't hesitate. He charged, drew his sidearm, and fired a single armor-piercing round into the collapsing joint. The mech toppled, crashing to the deck in a thunderous explosion of sparks and shrapnel. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of fires and the groans of the dying. Vorik staggered back, scorched and smoking, the human rifle dangling in his claws. He stared at Jaxon, chest heaving. "These weapons," he rasped, "are monsters." Jaxon holstered his pistol, eyes cold. "No, they're tools. Monsters are the ones we aim them at. Respect forged in fire." The mech's smoking carcass lay sprawled across the docking bay, its red optics flickering before dying out completely. For a long moment, no one moved. The air reeked of scorched metal and blood. Fires hissed, and sputtered where ruptured fuel lines bled across the deck. Then, as if on cue, the surviving raiders broke. Leaderless and shaken by the fall of their war machine, they scrambled back toward their boarding craft. Human rifles cracked again, precise bursts cutting down the stragglers. The rest fled into their ships, disengaging clamps and retreating into the void beyond the docking bay doors. Silence followed. Not peace, but the heavy, exhausted silence of survival. Jaxon Reeve lowered his rifle, breathing hard. His ears still rang from the endless gunfire, but his hands were steady. He scanned the bay. Dead lay scattered among the wreckage. Station guards, civilians who had tried to fight, and raiders who had thought themselves untouchable. Vorik staggered beside him, smoke curling from his scorched armor. The human rifle dangled in his claws, its barrel glowing faintly from overuse. His chest heaved with every breath, but his eyes, once mocking, once arrogant, were different now. "They're gone," Vorik rasped. His voice was hoarse, but beneath it lay something unfamiliar. "Respect. For now," Jaxon said, sliding a fresh magazine into his rifle. "They'll be back. Raiders don't like losing face." The other aliens gathered slowly, cautiously. Some whispered about the humans' weapons. Others stared outright at the bullet-riddled corpses of the raiders. The realization was sinking in. The galaxy's most feared marauders have been beaten not by energy beams or plasma fire, but by crude, ancient projectiles. A station officer, her insectoid mandibles trembling, approached Jaxon. Your weapons pierce their shields," she stammered. "We've faced raiders before. We lost every time. But you turned the tide." Jaxon didn't puff his chest. He didn't boast. He simply nodded. "That's what they're built for." Vorik let out a low growl, not hostile this time, but thoughtful. He lifted the rifle, examining its worn grip, its scratched metal body. "I mocked you," he admitted. "Called these weapons garbage. But today," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Today, I saw them carve monsters from the sky." Jaxon allowed himself a faint smile. "Funny thing about garbage, it piles up fast. Put enough of it in the right place, it'll bury anything." Some of the aliens laughed nervously at the humans' dark humor. Others still looked uneasy, glancing at the rifles with something like fear. Vorik straightened, towering over Jaxon. His crimson eyes burned, but no longer with contempt. "You fight differently than any species I've seen. Reckless, brutal, savage." He paused, then inclined his head slightly. "But effective. Perhaps more effective than all our refined technology." "That's humanity for you," Jaxon said. "We don't need elegant solutions. We need winning ones." Hours later, after the fires were quenched and the dead counted, the survivors gathered in the cantina where it had all begun. The same neon lights flickered, but now the air carried a different energy. Aliens who once laughed at human weapons now whispered in low, wary tones. Vorik sat across from Jaxon at the bar, a half-empty mug in his claws. He drank heavily, as though trying to drown the images of battle. Finally, he set the mug down with a thud. "When I fired your weapon," he said slowly, "I felt it fight me, as though it resisted being tamed." Jaxon nodded. "That's recoil. Teaches you respect. Every shot you take, you feel it. Reminds you the tool has teeth." Vorik's lip curled in what might have been a smile. Our plasma rifles hummed softly, sleek and silent. No fight in them. No soul. "That's why you underestimated us," Jaxon said. "You thought war was about style. For us, it's survival." The Kryn warrior studied him for a long time. Finally, he extended a massive clawed hand. "You've earned my respect, human, and perhaps my alliance. If your people wield such weapons with such resolve, then I would rather fight beside you than against you." Jaxon clasped the claw without hesitation. The handshake was brief, but carried the weight of something larger, an acknowledgement that humanity's place in the galaxy was not to be dismissed. Later, as the cantina quieted and exhaustion set in, Jaxon holstered his pistol and prepared to leave. Vorik's voice stopped him. "Human," the Kryn called, "if these are your garbage weapons, what do you call the ones you save for true war?" Jaxon glanced back, eyes hard. a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "You don't want to know." The cantina went still again. No one dared laugh this time. They had seen enough to know humans, with their crude, savage weapons, were not to be underestimated. Vorik bowed his head slightly, a gesture rare among his kind. For once, his voice carried no arrogance, only certainty. "The galaxy will remember today," he said. Jackson's boots echoed as he left, the battered pistol at his side gleaming faintly under neon lights. His final words drifted back through the haze of smoke and silence. "Garbage or not, it gets the job done."